Hey everyone, it's time to look back at a video I made 3 years ago to see how it's doing. Because that's just what I do.
So today we're looking back on, is La La Land racist?
Oh no. Oh! Good thing I never make videos about movies that I adore. That would be crazy. There is a new adaptation of Little Women coming up next month, and it's by the same director who did Lady Bird. And the internet is losing its shit. But when you have a cast that has Saoirse Ronan, Emma Watson, Laura Dern, Meryl Streep, Florence Pugh, and Timothy motherfucking Chalamet, how can you keep your cool? This movie definitely has star power, and a lot of the press seems to be focusing on that. But there are a few other aspects to Little Women 2019 that we should be considering, and here are a few of them. Ready, set, go. Greta Gerwig created my second favorite movie of 2017, and pretty much single-handedly, we cannot thank her enough for that. Following a girl who's going through some pretty intense growing pains, her name is Christine, but her nickname is Lady Bird. Lady Bird personifies what it means to have meaningful things happen to someone when the world around you seems directly opposed to those ideas. Power through. Christine dreams really, really big about college, even though her mom says that they can't afford it. But then Christine sees this wonderful house and lies to her new friends about living there, and her first time with fuckboy Kyle is over and done in about 30 seconds. And to balance it all, Christine can kind of come off as selfish. But I think that shines through thanks to Greta Gerwig's brilliant writing. Christine, is a beautifully complex character that does not shy away from the ugliness of being 16 or 17 or 18 and how confusing and stressful that those times can be. We could also easily say that Lady Bird is basically Little Women but set in 2002. I can't really think of a Lori allegory though, and Christine doesn't have any sisters. But if we think of Christine as Jo, then it's pretty much solid. Lady Bird is relatively light on plot, even at its 93-minute runtime, but its themes are pretty solid. It goes through ideas about identity, truth, masquerade, and mother-daughter relationships, and are pretty standard when it comes to movies of this genre. But Greta writes with this understanding that can make a viewer really ponder their own relationship with their mother, even if they don't identify as a female. And what really elevates it above common, coming-of-age movie fare is, the lack of gross-out, the interjection by the parents, the parental point of view, frank discussions about feelings, and the thought-out cinematography. So, someone who has a good grasp on women would be the ideal helm to a project that has been beloved by nearly 7 generations. And after all, Gerwig is directing this new movie as well as penned the screenplay, but this really is nothing all that new for her, seeing as she's done it pretty much since the beginning of her career. And gathering a team of women to play the March Sisters, who are pretty much influential to furthering the modern feminist movement, is timely without shoving it in our faces. And using her themes from Lady Bird to help personify the messages in Little Women as a text, while continuing to hold true with what Alcott intended for readers in the late 1860s. And a lot of the time, Little Women is seen as a coming-of-age novel, while also still being held in high regard by adults as somewhat prophetic. But at the same time, it's not totally incomprehensible to younger readers as well, much like Lady Bird. And there's a lot to be said about women on the verge of adulthood who are struggling with their identity, because that is a universality. There is a lot to be said about film advertising in the 2010s as a decade, mostly in how the industry killed the art of a good film trailer or a good poster, leaving very little to the imagination or even playing the best parts of the film in the trailer. in order to entice people to pay the $14.89 it takes to see a new release. I work at a movie theater. I know the exact price. Some backlash of the 2019 Little Women is that the advertising makes it look like some sort of mid-2000s romantic comedy, which is like... I get it, but we have to remember in this day and age, advertising has to hit certain demographics in certain ways. The story itself already draws in an older crowd for the generational nature of the story. Moms and grandmas will come because of the movie's title. And in an age where reading isn't generally all that popular compared to like actual visual media, there have to be other ways to lure flies to this cinematic honey that we call Little Women. So if we dress Little Women 2019 up like celebrities having fun in period clothing, Timmy and Saoirse frolicking around in some period clothes, Meryl Streep doing some amazing character work, Laura Derning it up, then it's bound to appeal to a certain demographic of younger people. And this advertising, while on the surface could appear to diminish the power of a story and what the film itself is, I can definitely see that point being made. Like, some people could say, oh, the only way people are gonna come see this movie if it's advertised as like a gay little romp with very light emotions and not saying much at all. Or these girls only have boys on their mind, which totally undermines the original story's message. Both of those are very valid, and we can't help that Sony decided to advertise it that way, but we can decide of our own accord whether or not to see that movie for ourselves and make our own judgments. It's also very especially important to note that for every iteration of Little Women, every main studio iteration of Little Women, the advertising on the film's main poster mostly adheres to the bond that the March sisters have with one another. Except the 1949 one where it's Joe with a man and then the three sisters are off all by themselves. But the bond of the three sisters is part of the main marketing for every major studio release of Little Women. Speaking of, there are 4 major sound movie adaptations of Little Women. There are also 2 silent versions from 1917 and 1918, and 1 sound one from 2018, but we're not talking about those because I'm biased. Every adaptation of Little Women has received pretty good reviews, as well as at least 2 Oscar nominations. Notable stars from each version are Katharine Hepburn in 1933, Elizabeth Taylor and Janet Leigh in 1949, Winona Ryder, post-Beetlejuice, pre-Theft, Kirsten Dunst, Christian Bale, and Susan Sarandon in 1994, and just a whole bunch of people in 2019. And each film, while being a reflection of the time that it was made, also made the 2019 version possible. So the 1933 version, while not exactly matching up with the genesis or peak of first wave feminism, can partially be attributed to it. Little Women 1933 is a pre-code film, meaning it was filmed before the introduction of the Hays Code, which led to much less restrictions on the story. Women who were portrayed as anything but a doting wife or a wonderful worker had to be punished in some way. And one of the most famously bad examples of that is Elizabeth Taylor in Butterfield 8. And so the Hays Code, even outdated by 1950s standards, set progressive productions back by setting these restrictions. But thankfully, Little Women 1933 escaped the Hays Code, even though it was a little bit sanitized for adaptation's sake. But it can still say that it benefited from first wave feminism. Little Women 1949 plays the material very safe. A lot of contemporary reviews at the time remarked about its blatant Victorian sentimentality, and how that necessarily was not a good thing. And further criticism came from the screenplay, specifically a lack of cohesion from the more whimsical first half into the more cynical second half. And comparisons to the 1933 version were unfavorable but inevitable, mostly in June Allison's portrayal of Jo compared to Katharine Hepburn's. But, despite this, Little Women 1949 still stands as a landmark in 1949 filmography and continued the streak of decently faithful Little Women adaptations updated for a modern audience. Little Women 1994 is amazing, and that's the T. It's amazing due to the fact that we have so many iconic 90s stars placed together to just create something truly wonderful. The advertising for this version, as noted by many reviews, made the film out to be like something dumbed down for only kids to comprehend, but many were surprised when it came out to be much more sophisticated than it was. And further, the film had about 45 years between it and the previous adaptation, a lifted Hays Code, and the 60s/70s feminism movement behind it. So, the March sisters were able to tell all of their stories, warts and all. This is also the first version to have set and costume details that distinctly set it in the 1800s, instead of trying to mix contemporary and vintage styles. Little Women 1994 is also the first version to be directed and written by a woman team. Winona Ryder kind of carries this movie on her back, which is really saying something due to the caliber of talent in this movie. The internal drama of the sisters is also due to some praise, mostly by reviewers of the time as well, in difference to films that were being released at the time, which relied heavily on like quick editing and flashy special effects. But because of the good acting, the writing, and the direction, this movie blew critics away. And given reviews for the 2019 version, I think we can say that we have captured lightning in a bottle 4 times. And of course, this is all speculation, but it's definitely hard to ignore all of this conjecture. Greta Gerwig has an excellent track record, and the stars of the film are uncontroversial, and the source material has captured nearly 7 generations. And with everything behind it, I think Little Women 2019 simply has very little margin for failure. So go out, see it for yourself. This is Dustin signing off, but only for now.